I got to be honest. I think that's one of our more underrated sound drops that we have. I don't know why, but that's I think one of my favorites, just because it's just gets me going. Like I get hyped for. It's not like it's not going to get me fired up. It's not going to make me want to run through a wall like some of our other drops that we have. But it's just nice. It's smooth. It's nice and smooth. Let's get into our fantasy stock report. Talking rankings here. If you missed our rankings yesterday, we covered quarterbacks and running backs. Today, we've got the pass catchers, we've got wide receivers, we've got tight ends. Let's take a look at the wide receiver ones for you this week. You got Davante Adams at 1, Amon-Ra St. Brown at 2, Stephon Diggs 3, A.J. Brown 4, CeeDee Lamb 5, Justin Jefferson at 6. That's your top 6 there. Then you got Tyreek Hill, Amari Cooper, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, Keenan Allen, and Christian Kirk, rounding out your wide receiver ones for week 13. Aaron, we got to start at number 2. Amon-Ra St. Brown has the juicy matchup against Jacksonville. So juicy that you throw him in at number 2.
Yeah. Look, Amon-Ra St. Brown continues to impress me. And I don't want to say I didn't believe it, but I just wasn't sure about Amon-Ra St. Brown coming out of USC. Like I just thought, okay, he's going to be some guy, and he falls in the draft. He's been really good, and I think he has a good matchup here against the Jaguars. I believe it's probably a top 10 to 12 matchup this week against, and they don't have anybody that shadows in Jacksonville, so I think he's gonna find himself obviously receiving a ton of opportunities. This is a team that's going to put him in situations. Jacksonville's 7th worst or 8th worst against the pass as far as fantasy production to a wide receiver, and obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown is their number 1 target. So 2 might be a little high, but for what Detroit likes to do, in getting Amon-Ra St. Brown the ball, I think he can have a nice fantasy output here. And there's some matchups that I'm not as high on this week when you start talking about some of those top guys. And again, I'm not advocating you bench your studs. Not advocating you bench CeeDee Lamb for Amon-Ra St. Brown. This is the conversation we had the other day. I just think the ceiling for Amon-Ra St. Brown this week becomes extremely much higher than it has been against some other teams. So I do think this is more of a shootout between Jacksonville and Detroit. And I think St. Brown's going to be a beneficiary of a lot of targets at home against Jacksonville. So, yes, he moves all the way up to number 2 for me. I had him ahead of Stephon Diggs before yesterday's game. Stephon Diggs had a nice day. I still think he can outproduce what Stephon Diggs did yesterday just by sheer volume alone. You're talking about a guy that his target share is insane for somebody that, I don't want to say came out of nowhere, but he came out of nowhere. I mean, double-digit targets is the name of the game for Amon-Ra St. Brown. The past 5 weeks, he's had nearly 50 targets, so he's seen 10 targets a game. And in that same time, he's had nearly 50 receptions. Nothing less than 55 yards receiving, and that was a tough day against Green Bay when he went 4 for 55. So fantasy production's been there. It's been in double digits 4 out of his last 5. I think last week he went 9 for 122 and a touchdown. I think he could put up those numbers again. I do think that he can have that similar style of game again. Look for Amon-Ra St. Brown to have a nice day.
Yeah, I like the Amon-Ra St. Brown play this week, but I don't know if I like it over someone else that you have at 4. A.J. Brown going up against his former team in the Tennessee Titans as the Eagles match up with the Titans on Sunday. I think A.J. Brown this week is going to have an absolute day. And I would have A.J. Brown, to be completely honest, if I were to do rankings, A.J. Brown would be my number 1 wide receiver on the week because of this matchup here being as juicy as it is. You talk about how Amon-Ra St. Brown is playing the Jaguars. They're allowing the 25th most points to the wide receiver position. Well, A.J. Brown's got the Tennessee Titans, and they allow the 31st most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. And not only that, A.J. Brown, we talk about the narrative all the time, and I'm going to do it, Aaron. It's a revenge for A.J. Brown. And it's not just any old revenge game for a player or a coach or a staff member or whatever. This is the ultimate revenge game because we saw in the offseason how controversial this trade to Philadelphia was, how A.J. Brown, he deserved the money in Tennessee. Tennessee had the money to pay A.J. Brown, and they refused to. They just didn't want to pay the man. They didn't. And now he gets his shot. First year with the Eagles, gets his revenge against his former team. The story writes itself for AJ Brown to be wide receiver 1, not just a wide receiver 1, but the wide receiver 1 on the week. The matchup is juicy. It's a revenge game. He's been sick. He's been battling an illness for the past week, and it led to like this the most disgusting like eye. His blood vessel popped in his eye. He was throwing up everywhere. It was disgusting for AJ Brown last week. He had a tough game, in my opinion, last week. I think this is just the perfect week for AJ Brown to come in here and be wide receiver 1 on the week.
Has he been sick for a month?
No,
that's how long. That's how long it's been since he's been good. No, let me finish. You can go to the revenge game and you can pick that out. That's great. But on the season, AJ Brown has been wide receiver 1 one time. He has been wide receiver 1 before. Outside of that, he hasn't been a top 10 wide receiver at all since week 1. No top 10 finishes. It's not about AJ Brown, and it's not about a revenge game. It's not about Tennessee's defense. It's not about any of that. You know what it's about? This is about Philadelphia and their offense and their style of play. It's an evolved version with an athletic quarterback of Tennessee's offense. They want to run the football, and when they throw it, they want to throw it outside the numbers, but it's quick throws. It's not directed at one guy. They don't scheme AJ Brown open. They throw to a bunch of guys. Devonta Smith, Quez Watkins. Obviously, Dallas Goedert not being there will help the cause of AJ Brown. But this is not about whether I think AJ Brown could be the wide receiver 1, whether he has the talent to be wide receiver 1, or whether this revenge game is going to mean that much to him. He can go run a bunch of routes as hard as he wants to. If they don't throw him the ball, it doesn't matter. He's had 23 targets in the last 4 games. It's going to be hard to be wide receiver 1 with averaging 5 or 6 targets if you're AJ Brown. That's the problem, is he hasn't really seen the volume, and I worry that their style of offense is going to be a problem here. It's not about they can't. Tennessee's not good against the pass, but the style of offense is going to cost them because Jalen Hurts is off schedule. He runs the football. They design it that way, and that's what's successful from a team perspective. And I'm sorry. I know Nick Sirianni is petty, but Nick Sirianni ain't gonna take the chance on losing a game to make AJ Brown happy and go and win and win a matchup. Like, I don't believe that's the case. I think Philly's gonna run their offense, and in turn, I don't think he's gonna get the opportunities to be wide receiver 1.
I think the exact opposite. I think they do, and I don't know how big of a risk it is to ruin your game plan if you do target and utilize AJ Brown a little bit more. And you talked about his targets that he is getting, and that how this offense does not run through him. But AJ Brown is 9th in the NFL in terms of red zone targets. He has been Jalen Hurts' number 1 guy when it comes down to that situation. And I think that plays into effect here in this game against Tennessee. I think you're just going to see that get elevated even more. And I think AJ Brown is guaranteed a touchdown. To be honest, I have my locked in bet. I might add this to my locked in bet.
You can't guarantee a touchdown for a guy that's had 6 games where he hasn't scored.
Put it on the board, AJ Brown touchdown this week.
Oh my goodness.
That's where I'm at with that. AJ Brown. I'm not going to put it on the board because that's a hefty task to say he's going to be wide receiver 1, but I do think he can be, but I do think a touchdown is in his future against his former team. It's going to be a special day in Philadelphia against the Titans. Book it, AJ Brown tutty this week.
AJ Brown hasn't had more than 5 catches in a game, except for outside of week 1 when he went stupid 10 for 155, except for one time. And the time he did that, he scored 3 touchdowns in a game. So he's had 2 monster games. Other than that, he hasn't been the wide receiver 1 that we talk about. And again, it's not a knock on him because he has that talent. It's the offense he plays in. You don't get the opportunities to do that. Number 1, Jalen Hurts is too inaccurate at times. And number 2, they're not funneling their offense through them. And despite what you may think, they're not. When you change your offense to get the ball to a guy more, you're changing your offense. Yeah. And that matters. And I'm not saying that they won't try to get him more involved. I just think that's something that is not on the front part of their mind. I think winning the football game because they know that Dallas is still right behind them in the NFC and they play them again, so they can't lose once. So because they've already lost a division game outside of Dallas to Washington, so they can't lose a game because if Dallas beats them, they're now a wild card team instead of a division winner.
Let me ask you a different. I'm sorry to spend so much time on AJ Brown on
Don't
this,
be
but
sorry.
to go away from my narrative of him being the number one wide receiver on the week, AJ Brown over the past 3 weeks, he hasn't been
He's been
phenomenal.
bad. He's been
It's
bad.
12 points last week against Green Bay, 9 points the previous week against Indianapolis, 1.7 points against the Commanders. He hasn't been great. Definitely not wide receiver one finishes. He finishes wide receiver 31 last week, wide receiver 46 the prior week, wide receiver 93 in the week. He hasn't been a wide receiver one since he was the wide receiver one against Pittsburgh. At what point do we start bumping him down even further? Because last week you had AJ Brown at 8. This week, obviously, the matchup calls for him to go higher. But are you on the verge of possibly being okay with putting AJ Brown outside the top 12 wide receivers?
No, no. That's why he's wide receiver 8 on most weeks, because that's what he is. From a rankings perspective, I believe he's wide receiver 9 on the season.
Mm-hmm.
Which is that's about where he's at with the upside of wide receiver 1. And that's basically what he's shown. It's why when I move him, when I see a matchup like Tennessee, which is a juicy matchup to your point, I move him from 8, 9 to 4. The consistency is a problem, but it's a problem from their offense. So I think the consistency of a Stephon Diggs, a Devontae Adams, and a Amon-Ra St. Brown, as far as guaranteed target share, is there. And their matchups are good, which is why they're ahead of A.J. Brown. Can A.J. Brown finish wide receiver 1? If that's what we're debating, there's no debate. Yes, he can finish wide receiver 1. That's his upside. He's the best could be the best wide receiver in football. However, the consistency to do that week in and week out is not there. So you're basically throwing a dart on when that week is, and you see a good matchup, and that's when you throw your dart, and you hope for him to get that there. But I can't trust that when I'm ranking him to say this is the week. Now he did it against Pittsburgh, which is a bad matchup or a good matchup for wide receivers. He made it happen, but he's had other good matchups, and it hasn't worked out that way. So again, I'm okay with ranking him higher this week because of the matchup, because of the revenge game. I do think Nick Sirianni is going to, at some point, say, hey, let's get AJ involved. Let's let him feel confident in what they're doing. I just don't think it's enough to get him to where he wants to, where you're saying he can go or he will go is close to wide receiver 1. Obviously, that can change. Touchdowns can change everything. If he has another 3-touchdown game, yeah, he'll probably be wide receiver 1. But I'm not banking on that because it hasn't happened this year, except for one time.
That's fair. That's fair. He's been wide receiver 52 over the last 3 weeks. That's not good. That's not good. But recapping, though, we are 1 through 12 again. Devontae Adams taking that top spot. We've got names like Christian Kirk with a great matchup, projected as a wide receiver 1 this week. And again, Aaron, these are now projections for your rankings here. Not so much of rankings, but more of projections this week, because we are now starting to consider accuracy. When we're looking at your rankings, we're starting to throw your name in the hat of most accurate fantasy analysts that are out there. So these rankings matter. You have to start hitting. So this is your wide receiver 1s on the week. Let's go to your wide receiver 2s. Ja'Marr Chase, Jalen Waddle, Mike Evans, Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, Garrett Wilson, Juju Smith-Schuster. You got Debo at 20, Chris Olave, George Pickens, Tyler Lockett, and throw in Zay Jones in there. Put some respect on Zay Jones' name. Got the juicy matchup this week against Detroit. Then a go-to guy for Mr. Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville the past few weeks. Zay Jones at 24 against the Lions. But Aaron, we got to start at 13. And really, I want to start at 13 and I want to start at number 9 because you have T. Higgins at number 9, Ja'Marr Chase at number 13. Ja'Marr Chase obviously returning from being placed on IR. He was almost ready to go last week. They kept him out. Now this week, he's ready to go, fired up. You, before the show, told me that Ja'Marr Chase was one of your hardest players to rank this week. What did you factor in? What did you come to the conclusion on when looking at Ja'Marr Chase's rank on the week?
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough because I'm not usually a fan of a guy coming back after a month. Wasn't sure if it was going to be 4 or 6 weeks. You just don't know, right? So you have to take that into consideration. It's his first game back. I don't want to say they're playing a tough. It's not a tough matchup per se. Like Kansas City is what Kansas City is. They're they're not good against receivers. They're not great. They're actually bottom half, or I think bottom 10. But they're the Kansas City Chiefs, and it easily can get away from you when you play Kansas City. And this is going to be a playoff style football game. So I'm anticipating it to be a little bit more low scoring, a little bit harder to get things going. I mean, you're not sure what he's going to look like when he come back. Is he fully healthy, or is this a rush to try to make a run at this AFC North title? So I just don't know. I know what he's capable of, which is why I'm trying to give him the respect. I know he's capable of that, but I don't know if he's going to be the main guy. Is he going to play a full complement of snaps? Is it going to be T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd who receives more of the target share because of that? So I'm a little concerned, but then when I look back to like, okay, last year he played Kansas City and he went bananas in that game. At the end of the season, 11 catches, 266 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's the ceiling of a Ja'Marr Chase. He played him again in the playoffs, and it was still a good day. But it was 6 for 54 and a touchdown, which is what I more expect of this game. I don't expect it to be closer to that 10 catch, 300-yard game. I think it's more 5, 6 catches, 60, 70, 80 yards maybe. And then if he gets in the end zone, now you find yourself having a really nice day. If you don't, then it's just, a double-digit, nice game. So I put him somewhere in the middle, behind the wide receiver ones, but a top-tier wide receiver 2. And it's about as best as I could come up with for this week only. This is a 1-week trial run. If he's healthy and I see him looking like Ja'Marr Chase, then obviously he's going to be back in my top 7, 8 receivers on the weeks going forward.
Where are we at with T. Higgins now that Ja'Marr Chase comes back? I know obviously in the past, this has not been a problem with the Bengals offense. They've been able to keep both T. Higgins and Ja'Marr Chase as wide receiver 1 and 2s throughout their time together. Do we see anything different come up here in this game against the Chiefs with the T. Higgins value and the Ja'Marr Chase value?
I don't think so. I think T. Higgins has definitely proven me wrong in the sense of last year or going into this year. I said that I had him and like Terry McLaurin as kind of the same. Like we wanted to make them wide receiver 1s, but they were never really going to be wide receiver 1s. They were more wide receiver 2s. And I think T. Higgins has the capability of being a wide receiver 1, even with Ja'Marr Chase on the field. And that's what makes him really different than Terry McLaurin. He is fighting for targets with Ja'Marr Chase, and he still is able to produce these numbers. So I'm fine with T. Higgins being a back-end wide receiver 1, top-end wide receiver 2 all the time. So that's about where he'll be ranked. Sometimes the matchup might depend. I might move him up a little bit, might move him down a little bit. I think this is a good matchup here. I think I have him at 9? Somewhere around there. That's about what I think he can get up to this week. I don't really see him cracking the top 5 or anything like that with Ja'Marr Chase on the field. But he's a steady option, and you're playing T. Higgins each and every week, and you should, don't even think twice about it.
Yeah, that's I have T. Higgins in a league, and I got to be honest, I did try to move him a little bit. I did try and move him just because of a little bit of concern with Ja'Marr Chase coming back, but there's no reason for it. There really isn't a logical reason to be concerned with T. Higgins because
they've played it.
They've played
together. It's not like we haven't seen them together.
And
there are some weeks where one of them doesn't have a good day, but a lot of that had to do, especially early this season, with Cincinnati's offense not being that good. But they all played weeks 1 through 7, or they both played, I guess, weeks 1 through 7. And I felt like during that time that T. Higgins was good. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I was trying to bring them up, but I believe. So T. Higgins was more. So weeks 1 through 7, he wasn't as effective. He did have a wide receiver 5 day. He had a couple of wide receiver 2 days. And then the other couple of days, he did not perform that well. He did miss a game or got injured in a game, which forced him to leave. But he did weeks 1 through 8. He had mostly sat at the wide receiver 2 level. So that was always my concern. Like, I think he's going to have more of those days than he will have top 5 days, but he's capable of having those top 5 days. I think if you have them both on the field, he probably sits somewhere in between wide receiver 10 and wide receiver 20 as his average out as far as fantasy points per game. So, but he's 12 on the season, so you got to give him credit for that. And he'll probably finish, like I said, 15 or so on the season. I think he's a solid play each and every week.
Okay. All right. So confidence in Ja'Marr Chase, confidence in T. Higgins in this week against Kansas City with Ja'Marr Chase returning. One wide receiver you have here at wide receiver 15 is Mike Evans going up against the New Orleans Saints. The world famous matchup between Mike Evans matched up against Marshawn Lattimore. This is something that is talked about everywhere when it comes to when the Bucks meet the Saints. It's the rivalry between Lattimore and Evans. Last year we saw the push heard around the world, the shoving match between Leonard Fournette. Was that last year or this year?
That was this
Wait
year.
a second. That was this. Oh my goodness. Time is going slow and fast all at the same time.
Three times. It's happened.
Yeah, they've battled it out on many occasions. But when you look at fantasy and Mike Evans against Marshawn Lattimore is keeping Mike Evans in check. Mike Evans is averaging less than 10 points per game, 10 PPR points per game when matched up against Marshawn Lattimore. His last game against Marshawn Lattimore, he had 9 points. That was earlier on this season, like we talked about last year. He had a 12-point game and a 2-point game against Marshawn Lattimore. Where are you at with your confidence in Mike Evans this week in that tough matchup?
Yeah, there's no denying that over the course of the years, when you look at the success of Mike Evans and what he's been able to do with, the 1,000-yard seasons and his fantasy production, pretty much being a back-end wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 his entire career, that Marshawn Lattimore's gotten the better of him. If you look at the numbers, there's been 2 games where Mike Evans has really produced, and they've met each other, I believe, 10 times or 11 times now.
11 times.
There's been 2 games. There's been one for 147 and a touchdown. And then there's been a game for 4 for 86, which I thought I give Mike Evans that win because I thought he had a good day there. Outside of that, it's been Marshawn Lattimore. And when you got a player that's played 11 times and the players pretty much shut you down for 9 games, I'm leaning the side of a Marshawn Lattimore, if he's healthy and playing, that Mike Evans is going to have to fall in some people's rankings, and you just can't project him to have a great day. And you put out on top of that the offense in Tampa Bay hasn't looked the same this year. Chris Godwin's emergence has come over the past few weeks. He looks like he's getting back to fully healthy, and I think Tom Brady likes Chris Godwin, kind of fits his style, being able to throw over the middle. I look for another tough day here for Mike Evans. Does not mean he can't produce, but you have to temper those expectations. I can see a day where he is 4 for 60, and if he gets in the end zone, boom, you have yourself a nice back end 1, top end 2. But if he doesn't get in the end zone, then there's nothing there. It's just you hope he's putting up flex numbers at that point, and it's the week that you lose. But you're not benching him. This is what I said. I'll say this at every 11 matchups. I don't care if you'd have told me before. He might only get 1 point for 14 yards. I don't care. You're not benching Mike Evans unless you are in a very shallow league and you have huge guys that you can play over him. You can't bench Mike Evans because that upside is 147 and 2 touchdowns. Like, you know what I mean? So my perspective, and I've said this over and over again, upside will far outweigh the downside of a player based on a matchup. And I know it sucks when you have a history that says 9 times Marshawn Lattimore got him, but I'm going to trust that Mike Evans is good enough to get the job done. And I'll live with the consequences of the results of whatever happens. So you're not benching him. You're just tempering your expectations. Maybe if he's projected normally for 18, 20 points, you're thinking, okay, I might only get 14 to 16 points from him.
Yeah, and that's really – I am on mute. Oh, I'm not on mute. Huh. Oh, okay. I thought I muted myself and then realized that I thought I didn't unmute.
Like, wait, if you're on mute, how am I hearing you?
Whoa. Mike Evans, though, over the past few weeks has not been that great either when you look at it. Wide receiver 75 last week, wide receiver 39 the week prior before the bye, wide receiver 33 in week 9. It has been tough sledding for Mike Evans over the past few weeks. He's got only only 2 top 12 finishes, and then 1, 2. So he's got four top 24 finishes this year for Mike Evans. That's where we're at with him this year. And it also reflected this week in your rankings because you have Chris Godwin higher this week. You have him at 10. So more of a Chris Godwin day, less of a Mike Evans day expected against Marshawn Lattimore this week, and Mike Evans has not been producing. So really, you're concerned with your Mike Evans stock. But that does it for your.
You said how many? You said he has how many top what?
He has 4. Only 4 finishes in the top 24 on the season.
4 finishes in the top. Okay, so 4 as a wide receiver 2. He's only
at least a wide receiver 2. He's got as a wide receiver 1. He's finished in the top 12 once or twice, I should say, twice, and he's finished in the top 24 twice. So he's got 2 finishes as wide receiver 2, 2 finishes as wide receiver 1.
That's got to be a little concerning for you. I think normally it's a little bit more than that, but Mike Evans is that type of player where he's very up and down as far as big games, not big games. Like he'll have you some 3-point games and then he blows up for 25, and then he'll have like a 10-point game and then a 3-point game and a 5-point game. He's done that over the course of his career. He did it last year a few times. He had single digits 4 times last year. Didn't score over 15 points, I think 4 or 5 times last year. So there is that with Mike Evans. I think at the end of the year, what you expect from Mike Evans is I'm going to look up and he's going to be fantasy wide receiver 10 through 15. And
he's only had a consistent stretch of wide receiver, at least a wide receiver 2 in 2 games last year. So if that makes any sense. So like stringing along top 24 numbers for Mike Evans.
He doesn't
happen often. Yeah, it didn't happen often last year, and this year it hasn't happened. He's only been a wide. It's the same thing as last year. It's the same thing as last year where he's had 2 straight weeks of top 24 play, and then the rest it's just been boom, 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 bouncing back and forth. Good shit on the Mike Evans talk there, buddy. Good shit. Let's move on though. That's our wide receiver rankings there. If you missed any of it, please be sure to head over to our TikTok page or our YouTube page to get that content.